In 1955, a brand-new public elementary school opened in a working-class neighborhood of Niagara Falls, New York. The building sat at the edge of a long, grassy field where the children of the families who had just moved into the freshly built suburb spent their recess. 22 years later, those same children would start showing up at hospital emergency rooms with chemical burns on the soles of their feet. The chemical company that had owned the land before the school was built had known what was buried under that field. They had warned in writing that no one should ever live on top of it. Sinister Business, Bankrupt Empire. The story begins in the 1890s with a man named William T. Love. Love dreamed of building a model industrial city around Niagara Falls, powered by a canal he planned to dig from the river. The economy collapsed before he could finish. All Love left behind was a long, dry trench, about 3,000 feet long and 10 feet deep, cut through the soil of upstate New York. In 1942, a chemical company called Hooker Electrochemical, later Hooker Chemical and Plastics, bought the abandoned trench. For the next 11 years, Hooker used the canal as the disposal site for the waste output of its chemical plants. By 1953, when the company stopped dumping, 21,800 tons of chemical waste sat in the trench. The waste was not ordinary. Investigators would later identify at least 248 separate chemicals in the trench: dioxin, benzene, lindane, Mirex, chlorobenzenes, many of them carcinogenic, many of them banned today. Hooker capped the trench with clay, declared the matter closed, and turned its attention to the next disposal site. 2 years later, the Niagara Falls Board of Education came to Hooker with an offer. The school district needed land. The capped trench, with its 16 surrounding acres, would do nicely. Hooker agreed to sell. The price for the entire toxic site in 1953 was $1 United States dollar, but the deed of sale contained a 17-line clause. It stated that the grantor, Hooker, had advised the grantee, the Board of Education, that the premises had been filled with the waste products of chemical manufacturing. It stated that no claim, suit, action, or demand of any nature whatsoever would ever be made against Hooker by the board or by anyone else who might in future own the land. The Board of Education built the 99th Street Elementary School directly on top of the capped trench. It opened in the fall of 1955. Within 2 years, Hooker representatives warned the city not to disturb the cap by building anything more. The city ignored the warning. By 1960, a working-class neighborhood of around 900 single-family homes had risen on the surrounding fields. The cap had been broken in dozens of places by sewer lines, gas lines, and basement excavations. The families who moved in were largely young, blue-collar, hopeful. They had bought into the post-war American promise of the suburban single-family home. They paid their mortgages on time. Their children walked to the new school every morning. None of them were told, then or later, what was buried beneath the lawn. By the mid-1970s, the chemicals were finding their way out. Residents complained of a constant chemical smell in the air. Black sludge appeared in basements after rain. Lawns dried out in mysterious circles. Children developed skin rashes that did not heal. A dog brought home a chemical-soaked rag from the schoolyard and died within hours. The neighbors began to keep records. In the spring of 1978, an unusually heavy rainy season pushed the buried chemicals to the surface. The capped trench breached. Pools of yellow, brown, and rust-red liquid appeared in basements, on lawns, on the elementary school playground. Children playing in puddles came home with chemical burns. Mothers began comparing notes. Their children, all of them, were sick. One of those mothers was 27-year-old Lois Gibbs. Her son, Michael, had been a healthy infant. After 2 years at 99th Street Elementary, he developed seizures, asthma, and a urinary tract disorder. Gibbs had a high school diploma and no organizing experience. She knocked on every door in the neighborhood. By the summer of 1978, she had founded the Love Canal Homeowners Association and become the most effective grassroots organizer in modern American environmental history. A young investigative reporter at the Niagara Gazette named Michael Brown began publishing the story in detail. State health officials, finally pressed by Gibbs's Homeowners Association and Brown's reporting, began testing the air and soil in the neighborhood. The results came back in early August 1978. They were catastrophic. New York State Health Commissioner Robert Whalen declared a public health emergency at Love Canal on August 2, 1978. The state evacuated 239 families immediately. Pregnant women and children under 2 were the priority. Studies inside the evacuation zone showed elevated miscarriages, birth defects, and rates of cancer that did not match the broader population. The disaster was, by any measure, a public health catastrophe born of a private corporate decision made 25 years earlier. 5 days later, on August 7th, President Jimmy Carter declared a federal emergency at Love Canal. It was the first time in American history a federal emergency had been declared for a man-made disaster rather than a hurricane or a flood. The federal government took over the cleanup. 2 years later, after a second wave of evacuations, around 800 families had been forced from their homes. The federal government bought every empty house. Hooker Chemical had become a subsidiary of Occidental Petroleum in 1968. Occidental fought every lawsuit for the next 2 decades. Eventually, in 1995, the company paid $129 million to settle the federal government's cleanup claims. It admitted no wrongdoing. Love Canal also did one thing nothing else had managed to do. It forced Congress to act. In 1980, the Superfund Act became law, establishing for the first time that the polluter, not the public, had to pay to clean up an abandoned toxic site. Bankrupt Empire, Sinister Business, The Dark Side of Business. Subscribe.